Thank you. I have the pleasure of introducing Laura Tomaka. Laura Tomaka is the director of CSG Midwest Office. She's responsible for managing the staff, providing secretariat services to the Midwestern Legislative Conference, along with various other association duties. Before serving as director, Laura served as the CSG Midwest Director of Policy and Professional Development. She served many years as CSG Midwest lead staff person for the Midwestern Legislative Conference Economic Development Committee and as the program coordinator for the Bowie Institute for Legislative Leadership Development, or BUILD. Laura holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Old Dominion University and a master's degree in political science from Loyola University Chicago, and it's my pleasure to introduce Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Stewart, for that kind introduction. I also want to thank Susan and Mary and Katie and the entire team of MHEC for all the work that they do, and also for their continued partnership with the MLC, and also for inviting me back again this year. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the bigger issues that our Midwest legislatures were addressing this year, and also provide a little bit of a preview of what we might see happening in 2026. But first, I want to start with a quick overview of the economy, and this is the most high-level, least technical snapshot of the economy you're ever going to receive. But just the point that I want to make is that we have some mixed signals in our economy right now. In terms of the overall national economic health, there are reasons for optimism, but I think we should also see that optimism as guarded. This slide shows some of those mixed signals. We have several measures that show growth still happening and some signs of strength in the economy, but we also have other signs that the economy is moderating or weakening or softening, however you want to refer to it. So again, I think we're guarded and we're cautious as we move forward, and I think we're seeing that in our state legislatures. So during fiscal year 2025, with that as the backdrop, what did our states experience? First, there had been the end of temporary pandemic era surpluses that resulted in an influx of federal funds. In addition, we've seen revenue growth beginning to slow. And some of our states needed to address deficits or shortfalls in the year-end fiscal 25, and others had positive but typically lower than expected year-end balances. So the result was that in crafting fiscal 26 budgets, legislators did so with a sense of caution and concern, and we've definitely seen some belt tightening going on. As we look at fiscal year 26 budgets, overall, the revenues are expected to grow about 1% in 2026, and that is compared to a 2.4% increase in 2025. Spending is expected to be about 6% lower than in 2025. And in some states, agencies were asked to submit flat budgets or apply cuts to their requested funding levels in 2026. State surpluses are shrinking after our historic highs of 2024, but they're still healthy, and they are able to provide a buffer in case of an economic downturn for the time being. Also contributing to the future economic uncertainty are the unsettled issues related to tariffs and global trade, as well as the potential impact of the federal shutdown, which, as of yesterday, I'm sure you all know, we have a record-breaking shutdown, longest in U.S. history. And we're also seeing the impacts that you heard, some that Tom talked a little bit about, the One Big Beautiful Bill. So in 2026, states are likely to continue to be challenged by slowing revenue growth, spending pressures from the higher cost of Medicaid, along with other federal program cuts, and again, that economic uncertainty that I laid out earlier. But again, I do want to note that states are in a better position with their reserves and their rainy day funds than they were before major economic downturns like the Great Recession and the pandemic. So let's take a look at what was keeping legislators in the Midwest busy this year. There was a lot, so I had to narrow it down, and I had to keep cutting things out, so that I landed on several here that I think are of more universal interest to everybody. And the big one was taxes, and especially property taxes. Property taxes dominated debates in most of our states this legislative session. And there were an extremely large number of bills being introduced. And Representative Stewart, you can live fact check me on this one if you can, but I saw one reference that said that there were over 150 property tax bills introduced in Illinois this year. Does it sound right? Okay. I read it, I did not fact check it, so thanks for that. So I'm gonna offer a few examples of the types of legislation that made it across the finish line this year in regards to property taxes. Ohio, North Dakota, and South Dakota were among the states that passed caps on property tax increases. North Dakota also increased the state's homestead property tax credit and the credit for veterans. Similarly, Indiana approved a new homestead tax credit. Indiana also provided some property tax exemptions for small businesses and also capped the amount local governments can raise levies annually. In terms of other taxes, there were a number of other tax decreases that went along with the decreases in property taxes. One of the more interesting ones was that Kansas legislature passed a trigger which will reduce tax rates when the state has a surplus. Kansas also approved a sales tax exemption on data centers, which is a big issue in many of our states. And Indiana expanded its existing sales tax exemption for data centers to cover additional forms of computing services. Wisconsin legislators eliminated the sales tax on residential electricity, and they also established a tax deduction for student loan payments. We also saw other measures such as the elimination of the sales tax on groceries in Illinois, a child care tax credit for employers in North Dakota. But perhaps the biggest news was that is coming out of Missouri, and they became the first state to allow 100% tax deduction on capital gains. So we'll see if other states follow suit. Where there's decreases, there are increases. We also saw a number of increases. Illinois increased, put a new tax on short-term rentals, and both Illinois and Indiana increased the sales tax on tobacco products. Minnesota repealed a sales tax exemption on electricity used for data centers. And Minnesota also increased the tax rate on cannabis, as did Michigan. Let's see. Oops, sorry. So when we look at some labor issues, the big theme in terms of workers and labor this year was leave for workers. And a number of measures expanded leave for workers, including parental leave for state employees in Iowa, family neonatal intensive care leave for Illinois workers, mandated rest breaks in Minnesota, an expansion of earned sick time in Michigan. And the flip side of that, just like other things, some states contracted some of their restrictions on, or placed some new restrictions on leave. While Minnesota put the rest breaks in, they also reduced the funding for the paid leave that they had started last year. Nebraska also narrowed coverage and eligibility for its mandated paid sick leave. Missouri repealed a voter-approved paid leave measure that was passed in November 2024. And with that repeal, it also resulted in removing a mandate to tie the minimum wage to inflation. So that is gone from Minnesota or from Missouri. Also related to labor, in a number of our states, including Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ohio, and South Dakota, previously enacted and phased in yearly minimum wage increases took effect. And one bill that I found interesting was Ohio passing a mini WARN Act, which requires employers to provide at least a 60-day notice to employees of when they will be laying off 50 or more of their workers. On the social policy front, gender issues were the subject of a lot of debate this year, with Kansas legislators banning gender transition medical treatment for minors. Transgender athlete bills were passed in Indiana and Nebraska, and one I think is still alive in Wisconsin. Andre might be able to fact check me on that one. I know it wasn't killed completely. South Dakota passed the so-called bathroom bill. And Iowa became the first state in the nation to remove gender identity as a protected class in the state's Civil Rights Act. Iowa also banned teaching gender identity in K through 16 education. Looking at education curriculum, there were several interesting measures that were passed in two of our states, and I'm going to highlight. Iowa passed a bill requiring high school students to pass a U.S. civics test, as well as a bill that requires teachers to receive training on evidence-based math instruction and students to be regularly screened for their math learning. Kansas passed a bill requiring science of reading curriculum to be rolled out, and that was a topic that, if you were here at this meeting last year, we heard about that topic in Kansas. And Kansas also is requiring that schools show a fetal development presentation as part of human development-related courses. A couple other things to note in K through 12 education. Michigan and Minnesota continued their universal meal programs for their students. North Dakota authorized the creation of charter schools. Also along the line of school choice, Indiana passed a universal voucher program, which in essence removes the income limits to receive private school vouchers. So again, no means testing to receive those vouchers. And then in the area of education savings accounts, both North Dakota and South Dakota passed bills that created these accounts. However, the measure in North Dakota was vetoed by the governor. And then one of the biggest issues that we saw, probably the most legislation floating around in our states, was on cell phone use in schools. And the Midwest has now joined the growing number of states that are banning or restricting cell phone use in the classroom. These restrictions usually come in the form that they are requiring schools or school districts to establish policies that apply restrictions or complete bans. So this year, Missouri, Nebraska, and North Dakota adopted a full-day bell-to-bell ban. Iowa and Wisconsin placed restrictions on the use of cell phones during class time or instruction time. And a couple of states fell short of issuing a full mandate. In Kansas, the State Board of Education issued a recommendation that districts establish their own policies restricting cell phone use, while South Dakota passed a resolution to encourage local restrictions to be put in place. Illinois and Michigan both considered bills, but neither passed. And then I'm not going to pretend to tell anybody in this room anything about higher education because you all know more than I do, but there were a couple of pieces of legislation that I thought you'd find interesting if you didn't already know about them. Missouri passed an anti-hazing bill. South Dakota now permits concealed carry by students on campuses at its universities. Ohio is now prohibiting public university faculty from going on strike, and faculty are also required to have post-tenure reviews at Ohio institutions. Indiana, Iowa, and Ohio became the latest Midwest states to end DEI programs and offices on their campuses, and they are joining a number of other states that had done so in 2023, which I think North Dakota may have been one of those, and Indiana and Kansas, I think, was the other one in 2024 who passed that legislation. A couple of interesting developments on political campaigns. Again, looking at North Dakota, lawmakers made it a crime to knowingly include misleading or deceptive statement in political ads. And South Dakota banned the use of AI deepfakes to influence elections. And so this will lead us into looking at artificial intelligence, which was probably one of the other top, probably 3 issues that states were dealing with this year. And really dealing with it is, it's changing so quickly, and so the states are trying to figure out what regulations they need to put on it, and obviously there was the temporary ban from states acting earlier this year that was removed, which as the Council of State Governments, and we believe in the state's authority on things and their prerogative, we were happy to see that that happened and allow you all to define what you want on this issue. But some of the major things that happened was Kansas has criminalized the possession, creation, and distribution of AI-generated material depicting children in sexual manner. Michigan criminalized non-consensual AI-generated sexual images or videos. And Nebraska passed multiple bills to protect children online, including the requirement that services offer protections such as parental controls over a child's account and parental consent and age verification to create an account. South Dakota also passed legislation requiring age verification. And Minnesota now requires social media to include a warning to users of the potential negative mental health impacts of using their platform. And it also requires them to post the suicide hotline on their services or their platform. And a couple of interesting things out of Illinois on the issue of education and AI. The first one is that the State Board of Education has been required to develop guidance for the use of AI in schools. But the second one was that Illinois has banned AI from being used as a primary instructor at community colleges. I didn't know that was a thing. Or are we trying to prevent it from becoming a thing? Probably. I would say it's probably a good one. I usually don't call balls and strikes on these, but I'm going to call that one. So some of our other issues. These are some of our main issues that, again, I didn't have time to cover everything, and I'm keeping an eye on my time here. Some of the big things that states also dealt with: healthcare costs and access, pharmaceuticals, especially managing PBMs, data centers. Again, regulation and siting is a big issue with data centers, also energy use and what that means to the grid. A number of things in public safety. North Dakota passed a huge criminal justice bill package this year as well on that. Energy, again, including nuclear energy. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Infrastructure and transportation. I think it was time goes by so fast. I think it was last week that Illinois passed a major bill helping with their public transit for the Chicagoland area. And we're also seeing two kind of the odder things that have popped up. Lab-grown meat. That's not supposed to be meeting. We're not doing lab-grown meetings. That would be interesting. I wonder what that would look like. So no, it's lab-grown meat restrictions. Autocorrect, I guess. So a couple of states have banned the sale of it. Some have banned, I think it was Kansas banned state dollars for being used. Iowa said that public institutions, such as schools, cannot purchase lab-grown meat for use. So as that technology is coming about, so those of you who were hoping for some lab-grown turducken for the holidays, you're out of luck, I guess. And the other one is that the Kansas-Missouri border war has flashed up once again, and this time it's over stadium funding. And Kansas, they want a new stadium for the Chiefs and for the Royals, and Kansas wants to lure them across the border there, and so they're both in a bidding war on this and passing incentives. So it's, again, that Kansas-Missouri border war. Hope we don't have any Quantrill's raids going on, but hopefully it's a little nicer war this time. So that's a short list of some things that were going on. A couple other issues that I think we all heard about. Mid-decade redistricting of congressional seats. So this has been received a lot of national attention, and some of it happening right here in our region. Ohio is included in here. Ohio is a little bit different, though, because Ohio was required to do redistricting because the original maps that they had passed did not receive bipartisan support, and that is the new regulations that they have with redistricting. So they had to come back and redraw the lines, and that just passed a couple weeks ago, I think it was. Missouri held a special session in September and redrew their lines, but there's a current court case, and there is also a current possible voter referendum on the 2026 ballot. Indiana is going into special session in December. I think December 1st is the date for that. And Kansas legislators have collected the signatures and the support that they need to call a special session. But as far as I know, they haven't called it yet, if anybody's heard otherwise. But that, if they do, I'm hearing it might be later this month. And Illinois and Nebraska have expressed interest in doing likewise to go into session to look at redistricting, but they seem a little bit less likely at this point. And then talking about special sessions, it seemed like every time you turned around, somebody was talking about going into special session this year. And you're not hearing things because there were special sessions held in at least 14 states nationwide this year, and that's a really high number. So this is a list of the Midwest states that either have held, will held, or are likely to hold special sessions this year, or possibly in the case of North Dakota next year, and the topics that they're holding them on. Special sessions just aren't about redistricting. We've got a number of other issues that are popping up in our states that need to be taken care of as well. So there's the list of that. And then I always take a look at, for you all, as we look forward to next year's elections, what the composition of our Midwest legislatures look like. And so here you're looking at partisan control. Republicans control 17 of 22 partisan chambers, and they hold a majority of the seats, approximately 63% of the seats throughout the Midwest. There is unified control, or trifecta, in 7 states. 6 states are Republican-controlled. 1 state is controlled by Democrats. And 4 of our states, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, have currently split party control. I've also indicated in this map which states have supermajorities in both chambers. So again, looking a little bit at that partisan control, this slide shows you, I don't know if that red might be hard to read, sorry about that. It shows the current seat advantage held by the majority party in each legislative chamber. That differential ranges from 57 seat advantage for Republicans in the South Dakota House down to a tie Republican-Democratic caucus or chamber in the Minnesota House. And next November, all chambers except for the Kansas Senate will have members up for election. So as we look at that, I would point to these 5 legislative chambers as the ones to watch, given the small majorities. That's not brain science. So if any chambers flip, this is likely where it's going to happen in our region. And I might add the Wisconsin Assembly to that list. Republicans lost several seats in the last election, and in 2026, it might confirm whether that's a partisan trend, if it was redistricting, or if it's something else going on in Wisconsin. So then turning to our governors, we have, there will be a number of new governors ready to take office this time next year when MHEC meets. Here in the Midwest, 9 seats will be up for election, with the exceptions of being in Indiana, Missouri, and North Dakota. Of the 9 up for election, 4 incumbents will be running for re-election. Those are the names shown in the green text. And 5 incumbents are not running for re-election. All of those have been term limited, with the exception of Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds. So then also looking to the elections next year, the 2026 ballot measures. We saw very high numbers of ballot measures in 2024, and we're likely to see another high number of ballot measures across the nation again this year. As of the end of last month, there were a total of 56 measures already certified to appear on statewide ballots across the nation. Of those, there are currently 16 certified in 7 Midwest states, with another potential 50 measures that are working their way through the certification process just in the Midwest. And I'm going to take a quick look at some of the measures already certified. As you can see from this list, elections and the electoral system are receiving a lot of attention this cycle. These range from candidate and voter requirements to changes in the initiative and ballot process itself. And then 2 big ballot measures that I would argue are important to watch are in Nebraska and North Dakota. Voters in both of those states are going to have an opportunity to possibly extend existing legislative term limits. If approved, Nebraska's term limits will increase from 18 to 12 years, and North Dakota's would increase from 18 to 6 years total service. And again, here's a quick sampling of the potential measures, some of the more interesting potential measures that are working its way through the system. Issues are ranging from taxes to education to elections to recreational marijuana. And so we might see a number of these appear on ballots across the region in next year's elections. So then, to wrap up, I'm going to talk about legislative session preview, and I've kind of outlined what I see. This is not a scientific poll. I'm just kind of going on instinct and gut and what I'm hearing and my own experience on this, and I've come up with some top issues that we're likely to see. And this kind of, when I say the top issues, it's kind of like probably more than 4 or 5 states at a time are going to be looking at them. They're not just a one-off kind of thing. The budgets, they're everywhere, but it is really looking at that responses to the tightening economy, what's going to happen with these uncertainties, and some of the challenges that they might be dealing with. Some of our states may be dealing with deficits before the end of this fiscal year, so they may be having to shore those up. So we'll see what happens on the budget front. Again, taxes, the push for property tax relief. It's not going away. It's going to continue. A number of states wanted to do additional things to what we've already done. Iowa wanted to do something. They were not successful in doing it, and I know it's the governor's. It's her last year, and it's really her priority to get something done on property taxes. So we'll see it there as well. And any changes that we look at, there's going to be the questions of who's going to pay for the changes and which state tax, what is the mix of state taxes that are going to replace some of the relief that is given. But obviously, if the economy continues to weaken and we move into even to a closer, God forbid we move into a recession, but if it becomes more recessionary, those tax reforms are going to prove very difficult to do in our legislatures. Again, that artificial intelligence, that challenge to keep up in terms of the regulations and protections is going to continue as we learn more about it. Unfortunately, AI learns faster than we do, and it's going to be moving faster than we are, so legislators are going to have their hands full on trying to deal with AI. But also, I think something else that the states are going to be looking at is the potential use of AI as a tool in state government. So that's something that they're going to be sorting out and trying to figure out as well in the next session and probably several sessions to come. Healthcare and education are always a top issue, if for no other reason than that they constitute such a large portion of your budgets and your state spending. So I think these are the issues that we're going to see in both of those areas. And then the last couple ones that I have are infrastructure. We had several states pass infrastructure funding and infrastructure bills this session, but I think we'll see some more do it, and some of the states that have already done it go back and put some more money into. We've got a very aging infrastructure in our region, and it needs to be addressed, and I think we're going to be seeing legislators trying to figure that out as well. Water quality and water use. Pollution, as it relates to things like PFAS and nitrates, will become an issue, as well as the use of water by data centers. And that leads me right into the next one. Data centers are growing. I did a count. We have, I think, around 300 data centers throughout the Midwest. It might be more than that. I saw a map and I just did a quick count, but there are a lot of data centers and they use a lot of energy. I had heard, and I don't know I know there's so many different types of data centers, but there's a certain Microsoft data center that uses, in one day, uses the entire amount of energy that Seattle uses in a week, I think. So when you're comparing those, and it's just going to go up exponentially as our smartphones continue and as AI continues to drive a lot of what we do in the world. So we're going to see a lot of things related to that. And then the thing leading to energy on that, energy is going to be a big issue. And I think one of the biggest points of discussion is going to be on the resurgence of nuclear energy. Are we going to go down that path? Are we not? Illinois recently lifted their moratorium. They had a 30-year moratorium on the construction of large power plants. And with that lifting, I think that leaves just Minnesota, who still has a partial moratorium. And at least in our region, we're seeing a nuclear reactor recommissioned in Michigan. It's the first time it's ever been done. So I think a lot of stuff about nuclear, the small reactors as well, but as data centers gobble up more and more of our electricity, there's going to be some hard questions about how we're going to be able to continue to feed that. So that was my last big issue for that one. So, and I do, look at that, I got 1 minute and 30 seconds. Real quick, I'm going to take questions if anybody has any, but I do want to do a little self-promotion. CSG Midwest has 4 webinars coming up through the month of November. You can capture it with the QR code and register for those. School safety, water use in the Great Lakes, that's focusing on data centers, property tax relief, and what our policy options have been for the states, and then also assistance for victims of crime. So please do join us for those. If you can. And finally, join us for any of our meetings. We've got our large national annual meeting coming up next month in Chicago for December 9th through the 13th, so please join us on that one. And then we also have our Midwestern Legislative Conference is going to be back in Minnesota, home of MHEC. We'll be in St. Paul. And you are all invited to join us for that. And we're going to the state fair, so get ready for fried food on a stick, everyone. So that'll be exciting. So please do think about joining us. And with that, I will close it out. That QR code, if you missed it before, is there for the webinars. Also, I'm going to take questions, but while you're here, we do have webinars like that on a variety of topics. If you are, especially if you're not a legislator, if you want to be put on our mailing list for our e-newsletter, please just give me your card. I'm around the rest of today and I'll be around tomorrow. So just hand me one of your cards and we'll make sure that you get on our mailing list to receive those things. But with that, I will take any questions.